Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
Across the Orion expanse, humanity had a reputation, one repeated so often it had long since hardened into fact. They were called the Ashborn by some species, the noise makers by others. In official Concord records, they were cataloged under a colder designation. Category 7 primitive, environmentally negligent, socially unstable, biologically unrefined. It was not a classification given lightly. The Concord had observed thousands of civilizations rise into the stars. Some were elegant, like the Ethri, who sang mathematics into their architecture. Others were ruthless but efficient, like the Core, who optimized entire ecosystems for resource extraction without leaving visible scars. Humans were neither. They burned fossilized matter from their own world to power their rise. They polluted their oceans, scarred their land, and filled their skies with debris. Their cities pulsed with disorder. Light, sound, motion, all layered without harmony. Worse still, their behavior was unpredictable. They could be cooperative one moment, violent the next. They formed bonds across arbitrary lines. Family, nation, ideology, yet broke them just as easily. Their communication was inefficient, layered with emotion, implication, and contradiction. To the Concord, it was madness. To most species, it was proof of inferiority. So humanity was studied from a distance, observed, judged, and ultimately avoided aboard the Concord research vessel Veiltari. The official stance on humans was rarely questioned. Commander Threx stood at the center of the bridge, his tall, segmented form rigid beneath the soft glow of navigational arrays. 4 forward-facing eyes tracked data streams with cold precision, while a fifth, smaller eye at the base of his cranial ridge monitored the crew behind him. "Report," he said. "Long-range scan stable." Navigation Officer Saran replied. "No active civilizations within immediate range." "Any anomalies?" A brief pause. Then, "Yes, Commander." The words carried hesitation. Threx turned slightly. "Clarify." Saran adjusted the display, projecting a faint signal into the center of the bridge. It flickered weakly, irregular, fragile. "A distress pulse," Saran said. "Low power, non-standard encoding." Threx narrowed his eyes. "Source, unregistered escape pod, drifting at vector 930. And the origin?" Saran hesitated again. Then quietly, "Human." The words settled over the bridge like contamination. Several crew members shifted uneasily. One technician instinctively stepped back from their console, as if distance alone could reduce risk. Threx's expression hardened. "Dismiss it." Lyra, standing near the secondary analysis station, looked up sharply. "Commander, it is not our concern," Threx said. "Concord Protocol is clear regarding Category 7 species. We do not engage unless under directive." Lyra stepped forward, her posture controlled but firm. Unlike Threx's rigid form, her species moved with fluid grace, limbs bending in subtle arcs that conveyed thought as much as motion. "With respect," she said, "this is a distress signal. That implies intent, intelligence." "Even animals signal distress," Threx replied. Lyra didn't back down. "This signal isn't random. It's structured, repeating intervals, adjusted frequency bands. It's designed to be noticed." Threx turned fully toward her now, all 4 primary eyes focused. "You are suggesting that this human demonstrates advanced cognition?" "I am suggesting," Lyra said carefully, "that we verify before reinforcing assumptions." A quiet tension spread across the bridge. Krull, the security officer, let out a low, clicking sound of disapproval. "Humans are vectors of instability. Their presence alone increases risk. We should not invite contamination aboard a Concord vessel." Lyra glanced at him briefly. "We study unstable phenomena all the time." "Not ones that bleed," Krull snapped. Threx raised a hand like appendage, silencing them both. For a moment, only the faint pulse of the distress signal filled the air. Weak, persistent, intentional. Threx watched it closely. Then, finally, magnified the signal. Saran complied. The projection expanded, revealing subtle patterns beneath the noise. Not just repetition, but variation, adjustments, corrections, adaptation. Threx's smaller rear eye flickered, processing. This is not typical of baseline reports, he admitted. Lyra allowed herself the smallest shift of satisfaction. No, Commander, it isn't. Silence stretched. Protocol said ignore it. Curiosity said otherwise. And somewhere between those two, a decision waited. Threx exhaled slowly through his spiracles. Very well, he said at last. We will investigate. Crawl stiffened. Commander, we will investigate. Threx repeated, sharper now, from a controlled distance. Lyra inclined her head. Of course. Prepare a retrieval drone. Threx continued. No direct contact. No exposure. The specimen will be isolated immediately. Specimen. Crawl echoed approvingly. Lyra said nothing. But something about that word didn't sit right with her anymore. The escape pod was small, crude by Concord standards. Its exterior plating was scorched, patched in places with materials that didn't quite match. Improvised, inefficient, human. It drifted silently against a backdrop of distant stars, its distress signal flickering like a dying heartbeat. The retrieval drone approached with mechanical precision, extending articulated arms to secure the pod. Life signs, Threx asked. Minimal, Saran replied, but present. Lyra leaned closer to the display. Stabilizing at low metabolic output, she observed. He's conserving energy. Crawl made a dismissive sound. Or failing. Or surviving, Lyra countered. The pod was brought into the ship's containment bay, sealed behind multiple layers of quarantine shielding. Atmospheric composition? Threx asked. Compatible with controlled chamber replication, Lyra said. No unknown pathogens detected, though I recommend full isolation protocols regardless. Approved. The outer hatch of the pod resisted at first. Then, with a hiss of equalizing pressure, it opened. Inside, the human lay slumped in his harness, covered in dust, streaked with dried blood, clothing torn, skin marked with bruises and small lacerations. To the Concord crew observing from behind containment glass, it confirmed everything they believed. Unkempt, damaged, primitive, filthy. One technician muttered. Crawl crossed his arms. As expected. But Lyra didn't speak. She was watching more closely. The interior of the pod, despite its damage, showed signs of deliberate organization. Tools secured in place. Supplies rationed carefully. A panel near the control interface had been opened and reassembled. Cleanly, precisely, repaired. This is not random survival, she said quietly. Threx glanced at her. Explain. He maintained system integrity under stress, Lyra said. Optimized resource usage. Repaired critical components with limited materials. Crawl scoffed. Instinct. Lyra shook her head slightly. No, she said. That's not instinct. She pointed to the harness. He secured himself before system failure. Adjusted positioning to reduce impact trauma. That requires foresight. Threx studied the unconscious human again. The dirt, the blood, the stillness. A contradiction was beginning to form. Remove him, Threx ordered at last. Transfer to containment chamber. Full observation protocol. The drone carefully extracted the human, placing him onto a levitation stretcher. For a brief moment, as they moved him, the man stirred, just slightly. A faint shift of breath, a twitch of his hand. And then, stillness again. Lyra watched him the entire time, not as a specimen, not as a threat, but as a question. As the containment chamber sealed and the human was placed inside, the ship returned to its quiet hum of operation. Data flowed, system stabilized, order reasserted itself. But something had changed, not in the ship, not yet, but in the space between certainty and doubt. A fracture had formed, and at the center of it lay a single unconscious man. A creature the galaxy believed it understood. A creature labeled filthy, primitive, animal. Lyra looked at him through the transparent barrier, her reflection faint against the glass. And for the first time since joining the Concord, she wondered, What if they were wrong? When the human awoke, the crew of the Veiled Tari expected noise. Not necessarily sound, though humans were known for that, but disruption, sudden movement, erratic behavior, panic, aggression, something that would confirm the Concord's long-held assumptions. Instead, they got stillness. It began with a subtle change in his breathing. Lyra noticed it first. She had been observing the containment chamber for nearly a full cycle, monitoring biological rhythms, neural activity, and micro-movements. At first, the human's condition had seemed precarious. Low metabolic output, shallow respiration, signs of dehydration and trauma. But then gradually, stability. His breathing deepened, his pulse strengthened, and then his eyes opened. Lyra leaned slightly forward. Awareness achieved, she said quietly, activating the recording systems. Inside the chamber, the human did not move immediately. He stared upward, unfocused at first, then slowly sharpening. His gaze tracking the unfamiliar ceiling, the soft ambient lighting, the faint hum of alien systems. No panic, no thrashing, just processing. After several seconds, he inhaled deeply when slightly and shifted, testing his body. Still calm, still controlled. That is unexpected, Saran murmured from the observation deck. Crawl, standing with arms folded, made a low clicking sound. He is assessing threat vectors. Predators often remain still before striking. Lyra didn't respond, because she was watching something else. The human's eyes moved, not randomly, but methodically. He scanned the room in sections, pausing briefly at each point of interest. The corners, the door seam, the light sources, the ventilation grid. Mapping, understanding. He brought one hand slowly up, examining it, turning it slightly as if checking for injury or limitation. Then he sat up, carefully, deliberately, no wasted motion. Lyra's voice softened, almost to herself. He's orienting. Begin first contact protocol. Threx ordered from the upper platform. Lyra inclined her head and moved toward the chamber interface. A translucent barrier shimmered into existence between her and the human, as the inner door opened just enough for communication. The human turned his head toward her immediately, not startled, just attentive. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Two species, separated by evolution, culture, and assumption, studying one another in silence. Then Lyra activated the translator. "You are aboard a Concord vessel," she said, her voice clear but measured. "State your designation." The human blinked once, as if adjusting to sound. Then he nodded slightly. "Name's Elias Varn." His voice was rough, dry from dehydration, but steady. Lyra noted the structure of his response. Direct, cooperative. "You are aware that your species is classified as high risk?" A faint expression crossed his face. Not fear, not anger. Something closer to resignation. "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot." Behind Lyra, Crawl shifted. "That tone," he muttered. Nonchalant, disrespectful. Lyra ignored him. Elias shifted his position slightly, wincing again as pain caught up with movement. He didn't complain, didn't ask for assistance. He just adjusted, adapted. "You were found in an escape pod," Lyra continued. "Explain your situation." Elias exhaled slowly. "Freighter got hit. Don't know by what. Systems went down fast. I grabbed the pod and launched before it broke apart." His eyes flicked briefly toward the barrier, then back to her. "Guess I got lucky." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Your pod shows evidence of internal repair." "Yeah," he said simply. "Life support started failing. Had to patch it. With limited tools." He gave a small shrug. "Use what I had." No pride, no embellishment, just fact. Crawl out a sharp breath. He is minimizing. Classic deception behavior. Lyra turned slightly. Or he is simply stating events. Then back to Elias. "You conserved oxygen levels by reducing metabolic output," she said. "That requires discipline." Elias looked mildly surprised. Didn't think anyone would notice that. "I did." For a brief moment, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Over the next several cycles, Observation continued, and with each passing hour, the contradictions grew. Elias did not behave like the Concord expected a human to behave. He did not shout or demand release. He did not test the barrier aggressively. He did not exhibit erratic emotional swings. Instead, he adapted. When provided with water, he drank slowly, controlled intake. No excess. When given nutrient packs, he examined them first, smelling, inspecting, then consuming only what was necessary. He is rationing, Saran noted. In captivity, Crawl added. That suggests long-term planning. Dangerous. Lyra said nothing, but her focus remained fixed on Elias. Inside the chamber, he had begun organizing. At first, it was subtle. He stacked and used materials neatly in one corner, separated waste from usable items, wiped down surfaces with the limited cloth provided. Why is he cleaning? One technician asked. He is reducing contamination risk, Lyra replied. Crawl scoffed. He is contamination. Lyra's gaze didn't leave the chamber. Then why is he behaving as though cleanliness matters? No one answered. The most telling moment came unexpectedly. A diagnostic drone entered the chamber to recalibrate environmental sensors. It hovered near the wall, emitting a soft mechanical hum. Elias watched it carefully. Then, as it passed too close to a loose panel, it clipped the edge. The panel fell. The drone hesitated, then attempted to correct, but its stabilizer flickered. Malfunction. Elias reacted immediately, not aggressively, not impulsively. He reached out, caught the panel before it struck the drone, and gently moved it aside. Then, slowly, deliberately, he steadied the drone with one hand, keeping it from colliding with the wall. Careful, he muttered, almost instinctively. The drone recalibrated and resumed its function. Elias let go. No damage done. No escalation. Just assistance. From the observation deck. Silence. It helped it, Saran said quietly. It is a machine, Crawl replied. Irrelevant. But he didn't know that, Lyra said. That was the point. Elias hadn't acted based on classification. He had acted based on situation. Something was falling. Something could be damaged. So he prevented it. Simple. Logical. Yet completely at odds with everything the Concord believed about humans. Later, Lyra re-entered the chamber threshold. You repaired the panel, she said. Elias glanced at it, now secured back in place. Yeah, figured it'd cause problems if I didn't. You were not instructed to do so. He gave a small, almost amused exhale. Didn't need to be. Lyra studied him. Why? Elias met her gaze. Because it was broken. The answer was so straightforward, it almost felt insufficient. And yet, it explained everything. That night cycle. Commander Threx reviewed the recordings alone. He watched Elias move. Eat. Organize. Repair. Not once did the human display the chaotic instability described in Concord records. Not once did he behave like an animal. Threx paused the recording on a single frame. Elias, sitting quietly, examining a piece of equipment with focused attention. There was no aggression in him. No disorder. Only intent. This is inconsistent, Threx muttered. Behind him, the vast data archives of the Concord remained unchanged. Centuries of reports, observations, classifications, all pointing to the same conclusion. Humans were primitive, unrefined, unpredictable, and yet this one man stood in direct contradiction to all of it. Threx leaned back slightly, his secondary eye flickering as it processed the anomaly. One data point does not invalidate a system, he said aloud. But even as he said it, he wasn't entirely convinced. In the containment chamber, Elias lay back against the wall, eyes half closed. Not sleeping, just resting, thinking. He had no idea how he was being categorized. No idea how many assumptions surrounded him. He only knew one thing. He was alive. And for now, that was enough. Outside the chamber, Lyra stood watching him, not as a scientist observing a specimen, not anymore, but as someone witnessing something rare, something unexpected, something quietly, undeniably important, a contradiction, and sometimes Contradictions were where truth began. The Veil Tari had returned to equilibrium, or at least that was what the systems reported. Hull integrity, stable. Life support, optimized. Navigation, uninterrupted. On the surface, everything was as it should be, but beneath the data, beneath the quiet hum of precision and control, there was a tension no instrument could measure. It lingered in the way crew members glanced toward the containment sector, in how often Lyra reviewed recordings that no longer required analysis, in the subtle hesitation before anyone referred to the human as specimen, and in Commander Threx. It existed as doubt. Status report. Threx said, his voice cutting cleanly across the bridge. All systems within expected parameters. Saran replied, we will exit the current drift corridor within 2 cycles. Any external activity? None detected. Routine. Predictable. Safe. Exactly how the Concord preferred it. Threx gave a slight nod, but his attention drifted just briefly to a secondary display. Containment Chamber 3. Elias Varn. Alive. Stable. Cooperative. An anomaly. Threx turned away from it. Maintain course, he said. The first impact came without warning. A sharp, metallic crack reverberated to the hull. Violent, sudden wrong. The bridge lights flickered. Then, alarms. Not the controlled alerts of routine diagnostics, but chaotic, overlapping signals. Multiple systems failing at once. Impact detected. Saran shouted. Multiple contacts, micrometeor swarm. Another strike hit. Harder this time. The ship shuddered. Shields. Threx demanded. Insufficient coverage. The debris field is too dense. A third impact tore through the outer hull. Somewhere deep in the ship, something ruptured. Pressure loss in sectors 5 through 9. A technician called out. Atmospheric venting detected. Red warning sigils flooded the bridge. Crawl was already moving. Seal affected compartments. Deploy internal barriers. Barriers failing to initialize. Another voice responded. System lagged across the network. The Veil Tari was designed for precision, not chaos. And this was chaos. In Containment Chamber 3, the alarm sounded differently. Muted, filtered, but unmistakable. Elias's eyes snapped open. For a split second, he didn't move. Then training, old, ingrained human, took over. He pushed himself upright, ignoring the lingering pain in his ribs. His eyes scanned the chamber instantly, not in confusion, but in assessment. Sound, vibration, airflow. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The floor trembled beneath him as another impact rippled through the ship. He felt it in his bones. Micrometeors, he muttered under his breath. The word came instinctively. He'd seen this before. Not here. Not like this. But enough to recognize the pattern. His gaze snapped toward the containment barrier. It flickered. Once. Twice. Then it died. The shimmering field vanished without ceremony. For the first time since waking, Elias was no longer contained. On the bridge, chaos escalated. We are losing structural integrity in the mid-deck. Saran shouted. Reroute power. Threx commanded. Stabilize life support. I'm trying. Systems are desynchronizing. Crawl activated emergency overrides. Security teams to breach zones. Evacuate non-essential crew. Then, a new alert. Containment failure in Chamber 3. Silence hit the bridge for half a second. Then Crawl turned sharply. The human is loose. Threx's expression darkened. Locate him immediately. But Elias wasn't running. He wasn't searching for an escape pod. He wasn't exploiting the failure. He was already moving in the opposite direction, toward the damage. The corridor outside containment was dim, emergency lighting casting long, fractured shadows across the walls. The ship groaned, a low, strained sound as its structure resisted forces it wasn't built to endure. Elias moved fast, but not blindly. He followed the pressure gradients, the sound of escaping air, the direction of chaos. Another tremor shook the deck. He grabbed a wall support, steadying himself, then kept going. Think, he muttered. Where would it hit hardest? A sharp turn. Then He saw it. A section of corridor ahead had been torn open, jagged metal framing a violent breach to space. Atmosphere screamed outward in a howling torrent, pulling debris, tools, anything unsecured, into the void. And there, two figures. Alien, pinned near the breach, clinging desperately to a warp support beam, their limbs strained against the force, their grip slipping inch by inch. They wouldn't last. Seconds, maybe. Elias didn't hesitate. Back on the bridge. We've located the human. Saran said. Display, Threx ordered. The projection flickered to life. And what it showed made no sense. He's moving toward the breach. Crawl said, disbelief sharpening his voice. That is not an escape route. Threx said slowly. No. Lyra whispered from behind them. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. It isn't. Elias scanned the scene in a single glance. Distance to breach. Force of airflow. Anchor points. No time for perfection. Only action. He spotted a tether line coiled near the wall. Emergency equipment. Likely intended for situations exactly like this. Good, he breathed. He grabbed it, securing one end around a reinforced conduit. His hands moved quickly, tying a knot with practiced efficiency. The other end, around his waist. He pulled it tight, tested it once. It would hold. It had to. Behind him, the two aliens struggled, one losing grip. Nope, Elias muttered. Not today. And then he ran. 3 steps. 4. Then he jumped. The force hit him like a physical blow. Air ripped past him, dragging at his body, threatening to tear him away instantly. The tether snapped taut, jerking him violently mid-air. Pain flared through his side. He ignored it. Hold, he shouted, though he knew they couldn't understand him. Didn't matter. The first alien's grip slipped. Elias caught them. Barely. His fingers locked around a limb, muscles screaming under the strain. Got you, he gritted. The pull toward space intensified, the tether groaning under tension. Come on, come on. Slowly, inch by inch, he pulled, not with brute strength alone, but with leverage, with positioning, with everything he had. The second alien reached out. Elias shifted, bracing his feet against the warped frame. Grab on, he shouted. They did. Now all 3 were connected. Now all 3 were being pulled toward the void. Elias exhaled sharply. Okay, we do this together. He adjusted his grip, pulled again. Every movement was effort. Every inch was a fight. But gradually, they moved closer, closer, until emergency bulkheads slammed down with a deafening impact. The breach sealed. The pull vanished. And suddenly, silence. Elias collapsed to his knees, breathing hard, hands shaking. The 2 aliens lay beside him, stunned but alive. He let out a short, breathless laugh. Yeah, he said quietly. That was not great. Behind him, rapid footsteps approached. Security teams, weapons raised. Crawl at the front. Stand down, he barked. Do not move, human. Elias didn't even look up. Not planning to, he said between breaths. Crawl stopped. Something in the scene didn't match expectation. The human wasn't attacking, wasn't fleeing. He was shielding, positioned slightly in front of the 2 crew members, as if instinctively placing himself between them and danger. Lyra arrived moments later, pushing past the security line. Her eyes took in everything at once. The tether, the sealed breach, the rescued crew, and Elias, bleeding from his side, exhausted, but steady. He saved them, she said softly. Crawl didn't respond immediately, because there was nothing to argue. On the bridge, Threx watched the replay in silence. Again and again, each time the same conclusion. The human had moved toward danger, not away from it. He had risked his life for beings not his own, without hesitation, without instruction, without reason, at least not one the Concord understood. Threx's secondary eye dimmed slightly. Processing, reevaluating, reconsidering. This contradicts all behavioral models, he said quietly. Behind him, no one disagreed. In the medical bay, Elias sat on a support platform as a diagnostic field passed over his body. Minor internal damage. Muscle strain. Surface lacerations. Nothing fatal. He winced slightly as the field adjusted. Yeah, he muttered. Figured that'd hurt later. Lyra stood nearby, watching. You acted against your own survival probability, she said. Elias glanced at her. Yeah. Why? He paused. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he didn't understand the question. They needed help, he said simply. Lyra held his gaze. They are not your species. Elias gave a small shrug. Didn't really come up. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just full. Because, in that moment, everything the Concord believed about humans had been tested. And something had broken. Not the ship, not the systems, but the certainty. And in its place, a new question had taken root. Not what are humans, but what else have we misunderstood? The Veil Tari did not return to normal. It functioned. Systems stabilized. Damaged sections were sealed and reinforced. Life support recalibrated itself with quiet efficiency. The hum of the ship, steady, predictable, resumed its place as a constant background of existence. But something fundamental had shifted, not in the machinery, in the minds that depended on it. The rescue had spread through the ship faster than any official report, not as data, but as story. Crew members who had never questioned Concord classifications now spoke in low tones in maintenance corridors. Technicians replayed fragments of the incident, pausing at the exact moment Elias leapt toward the breach. Security officers, once the most distrustful, no longer referred to him as a specimen. Now it was simply the human, and sometimes Elias. Commander Threx did not speak of it immediately. He observed, reviewed, analyzed. Again and again, he watched the recordings. Each time, he searched for inconsistency, for deception, for some hidden instinct that aligned with the established model of human behavior. Each time, he failed to find it. The human had not hesitated, not calculated personal gain, not acted under coercion. He had simply chosen. Threx stood alone in the command chamber, the replay frozen midframe. Elias, suspended in the pull of vacuum, one hand gripping a Concord crew member, the other braced against the tearing force of space. A moment of impossible strain. A moment that should not have happened. And yet, it had. One data point does not invalidate a system. Threx said quietly. The words felt weaker now, because this was no longer just data. This was evidence. Commander! Lyra's voice came from the entrance. Threx did not turn immediately. Enter. She stepped inside, posture composed, but her gaze steady. He is stable, she said. Medical scans show no lasting damage. Threx finally looked at her. And his behavior? Consistent. Still no signs of aggression? None. Threx studied her for a moment. You expected this outcome. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. Lyra tilted her head slightly. I expected the possibility of it. That is not the same. No, she agreed. It isn't. A brief silence passed between them. Then Threx asked a question he had been avoiding. Do you believe our classification of humans is incorrect? Lyra did not answer immediately. She chose her words carefully. I believe, she said, that it is incomplete. The meeting was called without announcement. Senior crew only. Command chamber. When Elias was brought in, there were no restraints, no containment field, no weapons drawn, only observation. He stepped into room slowly, eyes moving across the unfamiliar architecture, the gathered figures, the weight of attention pressing in from every direction. He had been in rooms like this before. Different species, different stakes. But the feeling was the same. Judgment. He rubbed the back of his neck lightly. So, this the part where I get spaced or thanked? A few crew members exchanged glances. The translator rendered the tone perfectly. Casual, dry, almost amused. Threx stepped forward. Neither, he said. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's new. Another pause. Then, Threx did something no Concord commander had ever done in recorded history. He lowered his head. A precise, deliberate motion, a gesture reserved for equals, for those worthy of acknowledgement. The room went completely still. Lyra felt like a shift in gravity. Krawl's posture stiffened, not in resistance, but in stunned recognition of what it meant. Elias blinked. "Okay," he said slowly. "Didn't expect that." Threx raised his head again, his gaze fixed firmly on the human. "Elias Varn," he said, "your actions during the hull breach resulted in the preservation of Concord lives." Elias shrugged slightly. "Yeah, that was the idea. You acted without directive. Didn't have time to ask. You acted without guarantee of survival." Elias met his gaze. "Yeah." Threx stepped closer. "Why?" The same question. Again, but this time, it carried weight. Not confusion, not skepticism, but genuine need to understand. Elias exhaled softly. "They were going to die," he said. "I was close enough to do something about it. That is insufficient explanation." Elias tilted his head slightly. "No," he said, "it's just not complicated." The room fell silent again, because that answer did not fit the Concord's framework. There was no strategic advantage, no evolutionary benefit, no calculated exchange. Just choice. Lyra stepped forward. "He repaired systems not assigned to him," she said. "He can serve resources without instruction. He maintained order within containment." She looked at Threx. "He behaves with awareness, with discipline, with consideration." Krawl spoke next, his voice lower than usual. "He entered a breach zone," he said, "without protective equipment, without command." He paused. Then, reluctantly, "He did not act like an animal." The words carried weight, because coming from Krawl, they meant everything. Threx turned back to Elias. "All Concord records describe your species as destructive, careless, unclean." Elias let out a small, tired laugh. "Some of us are," he said. "Some of us aren't." He glanced around the room. "Same as everyone else, I guess." That answer lingered longer than anything else he had said, because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't argumentative. It was simple, and in its simplicity, it dismantled centuries of certainty. Threx stood in silence for a long moment, processing, reframing, rebuilding. Then, slowly, he spoke. "Our classifications are designed to reduce uncertainty," he said, "to create order from complexity." Elias nodded slightly. "Yeah, we do that too. But in doing so," Threx continued, "we may have oversimplified." Lyra watched him closely, because this was the moment. Threx turned to the central console. "Record this transmission," he ordered. A soft chime confirmed activation. He spoke clearly, deliberately. Each word chosen with precision. "Concord Archive update. Subject, human species classification." The room held its breath. Previous designation, category 7 primitive. A pause. Then, status, under review. That alone would have been unprecedented. But Threx continued. Addendum, recent direct interaction with human individual. Designation Elias Varn. Demonstrates behavioral complexity not reflected in current classification. Elias shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. Threx did not look at him. He looked at the future. Observed traits include self-regulation, environmental awareness, adaptive problem-solving, and voluntary risk undertaken for preservation of non-conspecific life. Another pause. Then, conclusion, existing model insufficient. The transmission ended, and with it, an era of certainty. Later, as the Veiled Tari resumed its course, Elias stood near a viewing port, staring out into the vast expanse of space. Lyra approached quietly. "You changed something," she said. Elias shook his head. "Nah, just did what I could."